It's always been strange to me since I started playing SWU that there isn't a tier 1 Vader deck. We did have a brief stint in set 1 where Vader Blue was looking like the premier control deck, and then as the sets rolled on, it kind of fell by the wayside. But maybe we're returning to that where we actually have a potentially viable Vader deck, albeit set 4. But we're going to talk about the deck that got me a top 8 finish at a recent store showdown post bans, and we'll see how it plays into the meta. So here we are with the actual deck list, and I'm going to highlight a few different things after I give you a brief recap. So this past weekend, just a few days ago at the time of this recording, was store showdown at Redcap's Corner in Philadelphia. They hosted a PQ last season. They're hosting one this season. I'm signed up for it. I'm very much looking forward to it. It's always a great time going out there. Ben does a great job with all the events. And we had a very unique top 8. I did do a separate video breaking that down because we had 8 unique builds in the top 8, which is kind of wild. Overall, we had 23 players, so we're not talking a massive event, but this is our first foray, especially locally, into the post-ban meta. And everybody had their own thoughts. It was very interesting listening to everybody and talking to everybody about what they feel is going to pick up, what they're expecting for Richmond, and going forward. With that out of the way, I elected to play this Vader build. First of all, shout out to the KTOD team, specifically Chrono and Bobby Sapphire, because I know Chrono has been working on different Vader iterations for a while now. And I always felt that Vader Yellow was going to be the big draw for me. This was pre-bans. And then post-bans, that still seems to be the case, as evidenced by me playing this. Because I think there's a few elements that are very important in Yellow, but I will say that, and I mentioned this to a lot of people in the live stream, in fact, you can probably hear me in the background. You can check that out also on this channel, that a lot of, well, all of the colors, all of the aspects offer different tools. If you go red, you get new Tarkin so that you can make all your tokens more threatening. You get Force Choke to deal with Sabine, among other tools. If you go blue, you get all of the early ties like Inferno 4 and Onyx Brute. You get to play Iden Pilot, get the blue removal, that sort of thing. If you go green, you can attack Pattern Delta, and you obviously are going to have a million guys out, so you'll have targets. Additionally, you could go all the way up to Unity and try and do a Rex droid manufactory impression. However, as I said, I feel that Yellow was the best option, and here are the reasons why. It's mostly due to these guys, if I can point in the right way. The 1-drops. It seems really ridiculous to be playing Republic Y-Wing and TIE Fighter LN in a set 4 meta, but at least right now, I'm anticipating higher quantities of Quinlan Tarkentown. What does Quinlan not want to see? 1-drops. Because if you go 1-1, it's very likely that you're able to then connect with one of those on the next turn, or maybe even connect with both, because typically they're running, what, R2, maybe Soldier of the 501st, and even then it's probably a single playset of it, and that assumes they're even running 1-drops at all, which means that you're blanking their initial ping so you can get the ball rolling on the Vader setup. Now, you do have to consider that you're slow rolling things on a number of turns, but we'll talk about that as we go through. So the 1-drops are a big deal. Obviously, the other TIE fighters are in here. I'm not a huge fan of the Outland TIE. There's a couple different ones that you could be running in this slot. Again, shout out to the KTOD team. This is modeled after their list. It's not card for card. I personally love Victor 2 way more than Victor 3. I found Victor 3 to be really subpar most of the time, either as a pilot or as a unit. However, Victor 2, if you have to play it as a unit, you don't hate it on turn 1. It trades with Battlefield Marine, but it is a build a Kajimi patroller. Hope I said that right. Because you play any 1-drop, you stick the Victor 2 in it, and then now you have a 3-2 body, probably, or a 2-4 body on 1, and a token, so that you can, again, keep this thing rolling. The Star Hopper is just a decent body. I'm going to come back to the pump in breaking in momentarily. Personally, I don't want to leave home without 3 no good to me deads. I think Han alongside Quinlan is going to be one of the bigger decks. Anakin was present at the event, and there's a number of other leaders or other big threatening things, namely pilots. You know, an early Chewie is super obnoxious. More on that momentarily. But there are other things that could just get suited up, and you're like, oh, Darksaber? Yeah, I'll no good to me dead and buy myself some time, because you can absolutely race with this deck in a variety of scenarios. The Sanctifier Shuttle, I got to take a moment to talk about this, because this is the reason to play this deck. Remember I mentioned Chewie a second ago? You can capture Chewie. You can't capture Lurking Tide, but you can capture Chewie, which is important because you pretty much will always have Coordinate on turn 2. You either have to jump through a hoop because it's attack, then make a token, then you have Coordinate, which means you have to probably eat the first attack from their turn 1 play. Or if you play Kijimi Patrollers, you could just start the turn with the Sanctioner Shuttle and take their thing. In all likelihood, you want to capture their turn 2 play, especially if it's going to be something in space, but it gives you the option. This card is actually bonkers. You can capture Concord Dawns. You can capture Cassian Andor. You can capture things with pilots. You can capture those just random Battlefield Marines or Sabine units or Sabine's Masterpiece. Whatever you want. There's a ton of targets. Notably, it's 3 or less, so Bright Hope is a problem. We'll come back to that. But Sanctifier Shuttle is the reason in my mind to play Yellow Vader. Of course, we're running Vader's Tie, Victor Leader. I don't know how much it needs to be said about this, but I did have games where people were playing Regional Governors on turn 1 and naming Victor Leader. I think that explains exactly where this is at. This is a core component. It is not uncommon to have 5 to 9 TIE fighters out, and going from 5 damage to 10 damage represented on base, or 9 damage to 18 damage represented on base, clearly big numbers. Victor Leader, 100% want him. We talked about Victor 3. The resupplies are interesting because you're probably wondering, well, why aren't we playing Super Laser Tech? Why aren't we playing more ramp? What's the point? Well, this is actually a Resource 5 play typically in my mind. The main reason is that because you can then cheat the Vader deploy out, you'll catch a lot of people unaware. They'll structure their turn in such a way that, oh, well, I got to prepare for Vader next turn. I got to get ready. Well, surprise, Vader's coming out this turn. You are not ready. And something that I didn't mention earlier, but this deck dirtles really, really well. You are able to stall out for a really long time because of the amount of actions. It can be a drawback as it can take a while to get all the damage in if you're trying to attack base or attack into something. But being able to dirtle till late in the turn means that you could wait until action 35 on Resource 5, play the resupply when they clearly have had to claim. Like, they can't wait forever, at least most of the time. Waylays are just kind of a catch-all answer. Again, there's a lot of things you want to waylay. Notably, you can't hit Chewie pilot, but there's tons of stuff. And if they tap out for the aforementioned Bright Hopes, the Concord Dawns, other big Sentinels, all right, well, that's your whole turn. Waylay it and just keep going. Here's the main reason to play Vader. As compared to the Sanctioner Shuttle, which is the reason to be Yellow Vader, Clone Combat Squadron might be the best card in the deck. I think my record is making it a 19-19 without that much effort, to be perfectly honest. Typically, it's in the 10 to 14 range, as in a 10-10 to 14-14. And as you'd imagine, that closes out games in an extremely quick fashion. Here's the reason. You deploy Vader onto that guy, it's immediately a 10-10 because it's a base 3-3. It gets +5/+5 to 8/8. You make 2 tokens, which gives it another +2/+2. So you got a 10-10. If you have Victor Leader out, it's a 12-12 because the Victor Leader as a space unit gives it +1/+1. And then Victor Leader gives it +1/+1. And that, of course, doesn't account for all the random TIE fighters or other spaceships that you happen to have on the board. It's very easy to pump this guy to absurd numbers. Now, I will caveat that with you got to be careful not to overload it. If you're playing against a blue deck, I've seen a ton of Rivals Falls lately. Should people be playing Rivals Fall? Probably not, but people are playing it. And if you suspect one, you have to be able to split your threats. Now, there is reason to do it because then it protects an enormous clone squadron from, say, Fel the Dragon. So if you manage to claim, get initiative, maybe you want to slap Vader into the clone ship right away to protect it from removal. But it can ruin your day if they happen to have 6 resources and you go, womp womp, I'm dead. It really will set you back a lot, so you got to be careful. Dornian Gunship, I'm not a huge fan of. I'm looking at other options. I will say that I've played it for indirect of 11, as in I played it and I had 10 other spaceships out, and I did goose egg damage to the base because they had a 7 health leader that was deployed. They had a couple ground units because, as you'd imagine, you don't interact much on ground, and they just absorbed it all. That being said, we've all seen from the stat line of Ruthless Raider that the 4/6 stat line on Dornian Gunship is a big deal. It can't get hit with takedown. It can't be felled. Unless you then stick Vader in it, they're probably going to ignore it. But that means that it lives to have Vader get put in it, and it requires explicitly a Rival's Fall. Notably, for either of these ships, if you stick Vader in there, you're going to have to rely on bounce to clear a path. It's not uncommon that I've had to either split Vader because I wanted to split Vader, or because they have a Sentinel and I need one ship to punch through so Vader can get through, or vice versa. Because Sentinels are a problem. Next up is Geonos Patrol Fighter, one of the few playable exploit cards in general, but especially here. Turning your 1/1 dork from generating a token on turn 2 into I bounce your play, and I have a 3/2 ship plus whatever my first ship was, feels fantastic. And of course, later on in the game, it is very relevant because you could bounce other assorted things to make sure you win the race, clear a path. Again, Concord Dawn, notably 3 or less. It's 3 cost, so this is for 3 or less. Awesome. You're going to love to see this thing. Lastly, we have Overwhelming Barrage. It's a green villain deck. You're going to start with 3 Overwhelming Barrage. It's kind of a resource 6 play unless you resupply ahead of time. It's okay because often your barrage is for 12, 14, 16 damage. So you should wipe the board, but you do have to keep that in mind, especially in, say, a Sabine matchup where it's coming out later and you just have to plan around for it. You're not going to, I played a lot of Bosk where you deploy Bosk early and get an early barrage. This is 2 turns later. You could just be dead to, say, a Darksaber or something. So keep that in mind. The sideboard is a work in progress since we don't know what the hell the meta is looking like other than general thoughts, 10,000, 30,000 foot views. But Sneak Attack is kind of cute. It's been in and out of the main. It allows you to drop gunships. Like, remember how I said that the gunship could be enormous? Even without a Vader, getting it to an 8/8 or a 9/9 is still a big boy. And you just crack your opponent when they're tapped out. They don't have any options to stop you. And you go, all right, get in for a gazillion. Why not? Lurking Tie is something that has also been floating in and out of the main. CAD, as you'd imagine, is not something you really want to see, but this can help in CAD matchups because it kind of shuts it down. However, due to contract to Jumpmaster, it gets a little weirder. And they, of course, are going to be anticipating Lurking Tie, or I assume they would. So you could run into some problems there. But any of the ping decks, well, really specifically CAD, and of course control decks, Lurking Tie is going to come in, provide some value there. Outmaneuver is interesting. It's been all the way back in set 1. One of our locals was playing IG-88 Oops All Space and ran Outmaneuver and blew a bunch of aggro players out. And I did that on the day. I played against Sabine. I boarded in against other matchups, but it just didn't draw it, kind of thing. And when I played against Sabine, I was able to shut down their flip turn. It felt pretty good, but it only taps them down for 1 turn. It's not a no good to be dead, so you got to make sure that you're still building your board and applying pressure. Waylays and Geonosis just round things out, so that way you have extra stuff. I am looking at some other options in the board, but I did say that we were going to come back to the pump. So right now I'm running Breaking In. And it kind of relates to the sideboard because I think you do want to pump. I started with Surprise Strike. I was playing around with Punch It, and now I'm on Breaking In. After playing, despite seeing multiple blue hero decks that clearly are running Concord Dawn, and then the blue-green ones had access to Bright Hope, and even the Sabine I played had access to Bright Hope, I don't know that I want Breaking In. I had thought when I sleeved the deck up, oh, well, I'll Breaking In past the Bright Hopes with my Vader in clone ship, or I'll Breaking In past, say, a Devastator that a Piet ramped into, because I actually had a game the day before where that exact scenario happened. It was just like, all right, you killed my Vader on the ground. I have a big ship or multiple ships, but they're not big enough, and you're at like 26, 27, Breaking In gets through for lethal. That didn't really come up. I'm kind of looking back at Punch It because it is a 1 cost specifically, and you have a lot of turns where, resource 4, I'm playing Sanctifier's Shuttle, and like I could play one of the 1-drops, but this gives you another option, or one of the pilots. It gives you another option to squeeze things in on turns where you have to underdrop just because of the way it worked out. In my mind, I was thinking the 2 costs wouldn't be bad because if I resupply, then I could deploy and Breaking In on the same turn. It's going to be kind of a work in progress. We'll have to see. I don't know that there's room for more pumps. It would always be nice. There's tons of stuff that you'd like to include, but there isn't quite enough room. One thing I am considering is focus fire. It's out of the new Jump to Lightspeed set, and it's choose a unit. Each friendly vehicle in the same arena deals damage equal to its power to that unit. Now, you have a bunch of ties. It's not going to be individually a lot of damage, unless, Vader's loaded up or something, or you have a giant clone ship. But when you have like 8 ties out, you can annihilate a Bright Hope just to clear a path. And that's the main thing. I did run into an issue where there were other ships protected by Bright Hope, protected by Concord Dawn, and the amount of effort I'd have to put in to punch through the Sentinel and then sink everything else into the other guy was problematic. So this gives you a way to get to it in addition to the bounce. Is it going to be necessary? I'm not sure, but I kind of want to try it out in the Waylay / Geonosis slots in the board. I don't think I want to main it yet, but it may come down to that. Matchup-wise, you should line up well into a lot of things. Like I said, Quinlan, pretty solid. Cad, that's not really what you want to see. Most control decks, you can race them, and because you can generate a giant body, if they explicitly, again, do not have, they ramp to Devastator, or they have Rivals Fall, something like that, it is very challenging for them to deal with a double-digit size ship that's a leader. That's the big thing, is making these ships into leaders bypasses an enormous amount of removal. You can race aggro decks. I didn't really find an issue trying to beat Sabine if you can find the specific tools. If they manage to stick a Darksaber, you really need the Noga to be dead. They're going to race you, and they will win that race, typically. However, between the bounce and, of course, the capture ship, you can really set them back. You're building board position while depriving them of board position, and you can just kind of take over the game, and they're going to realize, oops, I actually can't race this. You do have to be careful if you don't deploy early with Vader that a random Poe that's just played naturally, because notably there's basically no ECL targets on the ground. Just don't play the pilot to the ground and you're safe. Overall, I really like this deck. It's been a lot of fun to play. I'm very interested in trying to tweak this further. I don't know if this is really going to be a meta player, because if people are prepared, even just from a game plan perspective, not even necessarily, I'm boarding bombing run or something like that. If they go to those lengths, yeah, you're cooked. If they just understand their game plan and they understand their sequencing, you're going to have a much harder time. But you will 100% catch people unaware with this if they are not prepared. Well, I guess by definition, you will absolutely crush unaware people. We'll put it that way. So, like I said, I really enjoy this. I encourage people to give it a try. It's fun to have a Darth Vader deck, given that he is the face, the mask of the franchise. But that's going to do it for this time. So as always, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and tune in next time for more Random Thoughts.